So we often hear about five whys. We say that you have to ask 5 times why to really get to the bottom of things and ask open questions. Well, let's have a look at this. 5 whys in the context of open questions. What is an open question? First of all, an open question is when you don't require yes or no as an answer, or you cannot get a yes or no as an answer. So why, what, how, when are all open question beginnings. Don't you think that this would be a good idea is a leading closed question because you can answer yes. So in the context of open questions, often we hear the expression ask 5 whys. Well, why do you need to ask 5 whys? It actually comes from a theory by George Kelly. And George Kelly from the 1950s developed this theory, amongst other things, a number of tools called personal construct theory, PCT, personal construct theory. And what personal construct theory means, if you simplify, is that we construe reality, in other words, understand, recognize reality through constructs, which are really just that, a scale of 1n being plus, 1n being minus. And those are what he calls constructs. So we construe reality. Let's say that one of your construct is good and evil. So you might look at people and place them on that construct in your mind between a good and a bad person. And he theorizes that we have not just one construct, but we have a number of constructs that are organized in what he could call a tree. So if you place them all together, even though of course it's a symbolic way of understanding the brain, but think of those constructs as being organized in a tree where at the base of the tree you'll have only a few constructs. So if we draw this now as a tree, no, it's probably not much of a tree, but let's say that this is a tree. At the root of the tree you have what we call 1 or 2 or 3 constructs, and is called dimensionality. So that's the technical term for it. So a person who has a dimensionality of 1.8, for example, is perhaps in our daily language more open-minded than a person with a dimensionality of 1.2 or 1, meaning that they can see reality in 1.8 constructs. So it's a simple way of saying that how many ways you can look at things. So if you look at somebody's root constructs, they're usually unconscious. Those roots, this is the consciousness barrier. So beyond that barrier, the person won't be able to tell you what the construct is. Above that, they will probably be able to find a way of expressing it, even though they won't call them constructs. And in clinical psychology, people go all the way down to the base of the tree with techniques that are partly called laddering techniques. And they have a number of ways of doing that, which I would not recommend you doing if it's not from a point of view of clinical psychology, because ethically speaking, we're not really allowed to go there unless you're trained as a psychologist. But you can still use the technique by staying above this consciousness barrier. And the way you do that is you basically use triadic comparisons of cards. So you've probably seen these card sorting exercises used a lot in market research and design research. And the idea is coming from this, because if you take 3 cards, any 3 cards, and with an item on it, let's say the A, B, and C. So let's say that they're pictures of products or pictures of services or attributes or whatever it is. You usually have a deck of about 20 cards and you match them into 3s and you ask a person, how are 2 of them similar to each other and different to a third? In terms of how you feel about them, how you think about them, how you use them, and so on and so on. So with those kind of questions, you can get to the construct, because they'll say A and B are similar because they are at the beginning of the alphabet, whereas C is later down in the alphabet. So the construct is beginning or end of alphabet. So there's a construct that we get out from this. But you can do this with anything. In fact, you can do it with people, products, attributes, benefits, features, and to actually do that with proper stats. Kelly developed actually a technique called repertory grid, which if you're interested in doing that, I would recommend looking that up, repertory grid technique. It's a very advanced technique which uses multivariate statistics, which is pretty awful to get your head round, but once you've understood the basic idea, you can use it in its simplest form by just understanding how to ask questions. So his theory is is about the tree, and imagine a ladder in the tree. So imagine that to go up and down the tree, you can ask different types of questions. Simply put, if you ask how, you go up in the tree. If you ask why, you go down in the tree, which is why, of course, if you ask 5 times why, what's going to happen is that you're going to probably hit that consciousness barrier at about 2 or 3 whys, and then it gets really irritating for people because they say, I don't know. But actually, it's because you're tapping into their unconscious. It taps into their beliefs, their values, and their deeper realities. So try it for yourself. Ask yourself 5 whys, and you'll probably see that it's really difficult to go to 5. So 5 whys takes you down. That's why. It takes you further down to the base of the tree. How goes up. You probably know some how might we questions. For instance, the designers use the how might we, and then you brainstorm off it. So how opens up your thinking, why closes down and goes to the core. But then you also can ask sideways, what? What do you think about this? And that takes you laterally. It's called lateral thinking, and it changes the way you think about it. But you can also go the other way by asking when. You could also add where. All of those what, where, whens are lateral thinking questions that take you sideways in the tree. So with this, you can now quickly figure out what question to ask based on, do you want to get more deep understanding of their values and beliefs and core thinking, or do you want to make it more tangible? The rule of thumb I use is how brings you tangibility, whereas why brings you down to symbolic meaning and depth of thinking. The reason behind, usually it could be values and beliefs. So depending on what you're looking for and where, if you're in an interview, for instance, or you're doing a presencing interview, or you're talking to somebody in a research interview, it's often important to be able to improvise a new question based on what they've said. So if they're too far up into tangibility and details, then you just need to ask why, and that's usually what you need to do. But sometimes if a person is too deep, then you can just ask how and get them back up in the tree. And then if you're getting nowhere, you can start asking when, what, and where questions to try and move them aside in the tree. So with that little cheat sheet of questions, now you can probably figure out which question beginning to use on an open question. Is it why, what, how, or when?